My name is Ann Pope, and I'm Executive Director of the Tennessee what am I doing? Tennessee Arts Commission. There's a Freudian slip there. My past life, I worked at the Appalachian Regional Commission, and one of my proudest moments there was this project called the Crooked Road Project in Music Heritage Trail. And what it is, let me just explain. In 2004, Governor Warner in Virginia officially dubbed the winding 200-mile stretch of road from Galax to Clintwood in Virginia, in southwest Virginia, Virginia's Heritage Music Trail. The Crooked Road, as we affectionately call it, encompasses 8 counties, 3 cities, and 9 towns. And I think what I'm so proud about is ARC was sort of at the beginning, but this totally was driven by the community, as most, the best things are. I sort of believe if the problem or the opportunity is in a community, well, the solution is too. And this is just tremendous what this area of Virginia has done to both save their heritage in music, but also to create an identity, a sense of place, to revitalize that, refreshen it, and an economic development stream in the process. So I'm really, really so honored to have Woody Crenshaw here. As we say in East Tennessee, he's a really big deal. He's a Renaissance man. He's done all kinds of things. He has a lighting company called Crenshaw Lighting. He founded it. It is in this unbelievable kind of barn facility in Floyd, Virginia. You need to look at it on the website. I'll take a cut of anything that you sell here, Woody. It is unbelievable in the craftsmen and the artistry in this company. He uses local artists to make everything he does. It's just so impressive. Also, in sort of his moonlighting, he is president of the Crooked Road movement, and also really he was at the ground floor of moving Floyd, Virginia, which had a struggling economy, really at initial stages with Floyd to moving it forward. So I'm going to let Woody talk about that. Also, we have Ray Daphner. Many of you heard from Ray yesterday. He's with the Appalachian Regional Commission, and he's really the idea guy behind ARC. I think so much of Ray. He's entrepreneurial in everything he does and how he thinks. So, Ray, we're so glad you're here, and Ray's going to kind of talk about ideas and things that other communities have done with their heritage, with their arts, to move them forward. So with that, Woody, will you take it away?
Well, it's really good here to be with all of you and be part of the conference here in Tennessee. I drove down from Virginia yesterday, and the time change gave me an extra hour. It's always such a revelation when you have an extra hour. An extra 2 minutes is usually is a gift. And I drove around the rural region and looked at the old stores and barns and wondered if Robert Johnson might have played music in that little joint on the corner. And it's a great region here, and you really feel the Appalachians, even though they're lower here and they're starting to peter out. You really feel that the range encompasses this area. And for me, land is a big piece. It's place-based. It's the earth that we walk on. And I just will start with a quotation which I wrote down yesterday and copied off of a plaque right here on the property. In our 9 years of existence, we labored to beautify your land, and we now pass it into your hands. The preservation of this country will remain strong as long as the flame of freedom is fueled by creative thoughts and deeds and not smothered by negligence. If you and further generations see fit to raise your voice in song of praise for us, the Civilian Conservation Corps. We will consider this our reward. And just reminded me of just how the development of place and beautifying the land is so much at the core of the arts movement. So I have a little slideshow for you. It's kind of like you've been invited over to my parlor on a Sunday afternoon to see my family trip to the Smokies. And these are all photographs that I've taken around Floyd County. And I just share a vision that we have in our community and in our region. And for 20 years I've been very interested in regional economic development, the creative economy, place-based development. And I'm going to share with you, as we talk about the Crooked Road and other initiatives, my town. Southwest Virginia is a 19-county area. It's bigger than a few New England states, and it's 19 counties, and as you can see, borders Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, North Carolina, as well as Virginia. Some people think that we're actually not part of Virginia. And you see highlighted a little 3-county region, and I'll show you that. That's what we call the Blue Ridge Plateau. It's an area of 3 counties, and I'll get to that. My county, Floyd County, if you look closely, is ringed by mountains on 3 sides. It has a unique watershed and climate and environment, and it was bypassed by the original settlement. It's been an isolated county, and we have been working for 15 or 20 years to try to figure out how we can actually move our county forward in a thoughtful and authentic way to create our own economy. And here's kind of the model that we've been using, sustainability as it relates to not only the economy but environmental and cultural assets. A couple of statistics. We're a fairly large area, and we have a few people. 15,000 in the county, 450 in the town, although I spoke to the mayor last week and he said we've lost a couple. He knows everybody by name, and it's got elevation. The lowest point in the county is 2,300 feet. An interesting statistic that shows that from 1900 to 1975 we were losing population. And we were losing population primarily because the young people didn't want to live there anymore. Couldn't find work. They were interested in a bigger landscape than Floyd County. And starting in the 80s, it seemed like for every young person that left Floyd, 2 people from New Jersey moved in. And so the population started to grow again. Our unemployment is low, but 60% of the people have to drive out of the county to go to work. And this results in a lot of self-employment, and we have no 4-lane roads, railroads, airport, or hospital in the county. And if you look at this, Floyd ranks 102nd out of 105 Virginia counties in terms of the average wage. Tourism, which is something that we've been working on, is actually 10 years ago, nobody thought that there was any reason for anybody to come to Floyd County, and particularly the government, local government officials just hadn't understood that. But you can see that we have actually even outpaced the state of Virginia, which has been a very successful state in developing tourism. So 20-odd years ago, we got together. We realized, when I say we, that's that's a big nebulous group of people that might be me and my neighbor, it might be the whole community, local government, the private sector, all the people that ended up at the table is the collective we. And so what are we going to do here? Are we destined to become a bedroom community for Roanoke and Blacksburg, which are an hour away in two different directions, or are we just going to be a destination for vacation homes? And we wanted to figure out what to do, and so we started looking at our assets. And we tried to do that very earnestly and objectively. And some people said, well, we don't have very much. But actually, what we realized is that we have beautiful scenery. This is Buffalo Mountain, the highest point in the county after an ice storm. We have beautiful sort of alpine valleys. We have a clean but very fragile watershed. Although over 50% of our roads are deemed unimproved, we kind of like them just the way they are. We ranked as one of the top Christmas tree growing counties in the state, and 60% of the county was forested. 35 miles of the Blue Ridge Parkway ran along the eastern edge of the county. Didn't recognize that so much as an asset as we do today, including one of the most apparently photographed places in the national park system, an old water mill called Mabry Mill. We had farmlands, but only 12% of our farmland was deemed to have prime soils, and it's a fragile ecosystem for farming. And we had a lot of entrepreneurship, something that might not be thought of as an asset, but is turning out to be that way. We had an emerging arts organization and culture, and we had bought this old dairy barn on the outskirts of town and started to remodel that, and it's now a 20-year project. We had a lot of magical places in Floyd, and we wanted to recognize those, and a lot of folks that were part of our community that we were proud of. And Oddfellows Cantina sort of put it in the window of the restaurant. And we had local music. And out of these mountains, over 100 years or more, there was the combining of the African banjo, which originally was a gourd instrument, and the European violin, which we call the fiddle. And as they say, the difference between a violin and a fiddle is that a violin has strings and a fiddle has strangs. And this mountain music was embedded in our community, as was a lot of local craft and art. And we had a Civil War history. And we had this little town. And because it was sort of perched on top of a hill, it was still a little town. It had a town center. It wasn't sort of sprawling in every direction. And you can see it here, surrounded by these mountains, our little town of 450, with a really neat hardware store and a courthouse and a local bank that was still locally owned, and a telephone cooperative, which in the early 50s, when Ma Bell was slow to get telecommunications to Floyd County, the citizens got together and did it themselves, created a telephone cooperative which still exists today. And in 1990, in a very bold and forward-thinking move, our cooperative laid a county-wide fiber optic network. So we didn't have any four-lane roads, but we had high-speed internet. And we had empty textile factories, which we could fill up, had our little local newspaper. And we had a kind of a quirky, interesting little mix of businesses and people. Here's the Republic of Floyd. Some people think that we should actually secede from the state of Virginia, and they are pushing that message. If you went into the barber shop to get a haircut, you might actually walk in on a jam session. Here's our 1950s drive-in restaurant that still is going on, and our coffee roasting business, and lots of small locally owned businesses. So we thought about a vision for our future. And we thought, well, there's 40% of the communities east of the Mississippi have at least one empty shell building, and there's no way we're going to compete for that business. So let's really localize our economy. We'll anchor it more and more closely to the community that we are, and we will protect our natural resources, and we'll formalize this very nebulous, loose, creative economy and develop our town center. And I think psychologically we felt that we had a small town, but we had to connect ourselves in our thinking and our vision to the greater region, even the global region. So we went about this piece by piece. We got a CDBG grant, and at this point we gathered together about a dozen families who were willing to put money into this. And I'm interested in how that happened, because I actually don't even know the magic of it, but we got 12 families together to put $500,000 in the bank, and we started buying buildings in downtown Floyd. And we got a lot of help from state government, from ARC, from rural development, but the real seed of that came from a group of citizens who said, you know, we want to live here. We want to create a place that's good for us and for our kids and for visitors, and we're going to pony up to do that. So we built a community market, and we restored about 20 buildings, and we built a town park and public parking and public restrooms, and these are two buildings that were very blighted and derelict. And here's the market that we built. And it was built with local money and local people and local businesses. And here's the old food store that went out of business in 2002. And here's the same building today. And so then, as far as the creative economy is concerned, you know, what are the aspects and elements of that? And it's music and craft and art, but it's also entrepreneurship and artisan agriculture and history and writing and photography and a celebration of the local environment. But more than anything, it's sort of the intellectual property of the place, expressing the creativity and ingenuity that existed there. How can we do that? What does that look like? Along comes the Crooked Road, as Ann was talking about. And we didn't know much about the Crooked Road. We always had been driving around on crooked roads. We didn't think we needed to say anything about it. But as Ann pointed out, it was an initiative that came out of Governor Warner's Public Works. And Floyd was one of the prime destinations, because somebody not from Floyd said, this community has a very rich musical heritage. And the Floyd Country Store, this old general store in the middle of town that people have been sitting around the wood stove for the last 100 years playing banjos and fiddles and mandolins, needs to be one of the major pearls on the Crooked Road. And that really began. And here's Southwest Virginia with the map of the Crooked Road overlaid over it. And today there are 9 major venues, of which the Floyd Country Store is one, and over 50 affiliate venues. These are hardware stores, restaurants, convenience stores, firehouses where music is played. And people are invited from all over the country and beyond, internationally, to come and travel the back roads of Southwest Virginia, go up and down and around the bend and around the crooked trails and roads and visit these venues. And it's still very much a young organization that is struggling to find its place in the cultural heritage world. And I'm currently serving as president and very proud of the organization. The Country Store itself went through a big renovation. My wife and I decided to buy it. It was about to fall down, and we did a big renovation on it. And it has been the center of the musical culture of Floyd. Well, it's been a center for 100 years, but in this recent wave, it continues to be the center. And what we figured out was that if you could find a way to make it be a place that musicians wanted to play, everything else would come. And so that's what we did. We celebrated the musicians, we fed the musicians, we respected the musicians, we gave them our heart and our respect, and the musicians came, and then so did everybody else. This is a typical Friday night scene inside the Country Store. Goes on 52 weeks a year. People come, we move the merchandise out of the way, and we do music and dance. And then there's all these sort of things that happen outside on a summer warm evening. There are people that come to town with their instruments, and they huddle up and have jam sessions going on. It's our little weekly mini festival. I don't know exactly where this guy's headed, but he's wearing an American flag and a tie-dye t-shirt, and it's going to be good where it is. And this is Ida Kemp, who plays on the street every week, and Chance McCoy, the West Virginia State fiddle champion who lives in Floyd, Arthur Connor, an old a winner of a National Heritage Award as a fiddle maker. And here's the whole thing. It's the state trooper on bass, the woman in the tie-dye singing harmony, and a couple of old musicians in between. And from that we developed a bunch of other sort of small projects. This is the Floyd Radio Show. This is our version of a Prairie Home Companion, which is broadcast live once a month from the Country Store, and tells the stories of all the quirkiness of Floyd County. And ultimately, this leads to young people becoming interested in music. And we have a very vibrant young musicians community, and teaching and events planned around them. And this photo is an old guy with 5 kids singing harmony. Round the Mountain, similarly, is an organization that we started to celebrate the craft, the heritage craft and the contemporary craft of the community. And this is the same map, and if you looked at it closely, there are over 500 destinations, studios, galleries, craft shops that over the past 8 years, modeled after Handmade in America, we created this organization. And we then created a series of artisan trails where every county in Southwest Virginia was able to present their artisans, their destinations. And you could come into Southwest Virginia at any point and pick up the trail that led you to every other point. This is kind of what you would drive by and become interested in. And This is the station building in Floyd. This is a building that we restored that used to be a service station and now holds about, I guess, about 7 studios and gallery spaces. And workshops, the whole thing is going on right here. It's the quilt making and the music, and this is Bell Gallery in Floyd, which offers contemporary craft. And of course, you know, taste is a part of our ability to determine quality and interest. And we created this tasting room in Floyd, which had product from 5 wineries, local wineries, and a meadery and a cidery. And so that we felt was very much a part of the creative economy, is that agricultural piece. And here's the craft market, which happens in Floyd every Friday night, and some images of people and things. And here's the craft market. This is Mary, and this is Nancy showing her work. So Floyd then decided that we would have an event around our artisan trail, and we created an event. We're working on our 3rd year now, and over 60 local studios, galleries, and supporting organizations open for a 4-day weekend in June. And last year we had about 1,100 people come to that, and it's growing. And that connects the customer directly with the artist. And that's the best way for them to make a living. They don't have to go anywhere. They're staying at home, and the customers come to them. Along the way, we started, this is the big collective we, the Southwest Virginia Cultural Heritage Foundation, which is actually was mandated by the state legislature. I'm currently serving on that board, and it is primarily a political organization that is getting its arms around all of the different threads and possibilities and opportunities in Southwest Virginia. And one of our big lead project was the creation of the Heartwood Center, which is sort of the hub that connects all the spokes of Southwest Virginia. It's in Abingdon, and it's a 28,000 square foot facility that is 18 months since it opened, and has arts and crafts and workshops and music and festivals, conferences, and really is the anchor for a lot of the work that we're doing. So back to Floyd. It's not just about the creative economy and tourism. Agriculture was just we felt like was a huge piece. And also it's this whole reality that for a couple of decades, maybe longer, recruiting a business to come into your community was the way that everybody thought it needed to be done. The savior from outside would come, create jobs, create wealth, and then we'd all be better for it. But as I say, with 40% of communities east of the Mississippi having an empty shell building, it became pretty difficult. And you could just about give away the whole town, and it wouldn't be enough to lure that business. But additionally, when that business came, it imposed its vision of community on the community. And that vision might not actually be the long-term vision that you wanted. So what we see now is that communities are attracting business by having an environment, a quality of life, a creativity, a dynamism that is not about offering benefits, but you're offering the quality of your community as a reason to move there. And young high-tech entrepreneurs are more and more making decisions based on that. So we're looking at that too. But we want all of our growth to be related to quality of the life of the people, the visitors, the environment. And so agriculture is the big pulse that we're working on right now. And it involves our essential assets, farms and forests and soil and water, the assets that can't be either outsourced or recreated. And we see that we have good farmland, although not that much of it. And when we looked around, we realized, like almost every community in our region, it's an agriculture of cattle and cattle feed, which since the Second World War has been the predominant agricultural strategy. It's both corrosive to the land and it's unprofitable for the farmers. So a lot of land is laying fallow. It's not being farmed. The farmers can't make a living on it. But we looked back before the war and we saw, well, hey, there's another history of agriculture here. There's vegetable farming, there's orchards, and if you look around, you see that distant past is still there, like all these old tractors. And so what would the new model of agriculture look like? Well, if you go to Vermont or Western Massachusetts or the Pacific Northwest, it's all there. You don't have to invent it. But it's about the creation of a local food system, something that increases the value of farmland so that that farmland can continue to be used and not subdivided. And growing nutritious food locally is a way to hedge against food security issues globally. And so that was another important piece of this. And the farming in such a way is that you protect natural resources and you don't let the soil wash into the rivers and creeks. But we needed regional partners for this. Floyd, we could model this, but we needed a bigger landscape for this, we felt. So here's just some pictures of a trip to Vermont where you walk into a supermarket and aisle after aisle has not only local produce and meat, but value-added products and dairy products and incentives to buy locally. They're 20 years ahead of us. And we figured out in our little small county that if each of the 6,000 families spent $10 a week on local food, that would be $3 million. That's one small county, and that's just $10. Think if it was $10 a person, you'd start to be seeing a $10 million industry emerging. And so we've reached out to our partners along the Blue Ridge Plateau. Carroll County and Grayson County, we're in conversation with them about starting a food brand and becoming a food shed for the 10 million people that are within a 2.5-hour drive of us. And we created this visionary mandala, which started with creating an institute, the Blue Ridge Institute for Sustainable Agriculture. And we put in place all the things that we needed, although right now none of them are there. But they're all on the board, and we're working on them. And it has to do with a local dairy processing facility so that the farmer's milk that gets sent out as raw product can be processed in the county, a vegetable canning and processing facility so that vegetables can also have added value in the county, a farm school to educate the next generation of farmers to the kinds of farming that we want to do, an aggregation service so that we can actually sell these products, a branding of the region, a farmers cooperative. And so we are actually working with the help of grants from ARC, most specifically where we have just gotten a feasibility study back on the dairy processing facility. They say that we can take all the milk in Floyd County, which in 1975 there were 40 dairies and now there's 11. The milk from those 11 dairies can be run through a dairy processing facility. Cheese can be made. The whey, the byproduct, can be run through a biodigester that will create the energy to run the whole thing, and it will create $7 million worth of economic development for those farmers. And we've done the same thing with a vegetable processing facility, and we've gotten that report back too. To show that it would work, we started an organic vegetable farm called Riverstone Farm, and we're 2 years into it right now. We've designed from the ground up a farm, a next generation farm, and the farmers market in Floyd is starting to really buzz, and people, not just local folks, but people from the region come to Floyd on Saturday mornings and find really good local organic food. And here's a young person participating in the tomato tasting contest, and another prospective farmer. All of this together, everything that I'm talking about, is not the whole picture. There's a bigger picture. And we realized that what we needed was to start an organization, and we created this organization called Sustain Floyd. There's nobody doing 20-year plans, 30-year plans. Local government can't do it. For-profit aren't doing it. Who's doing the long-term visioning? And so we started this organization, Sustain Floyd, to begin to look at that. In our first 3 years, we wrote 16 grants that we were awarded $600,000 to finance projects in agriculture, alternative energy, school nutrition, healthcare, and we've been partnering with local government, with the private sector, with the schools, and we've put this model together as to some of the work that we want to do. One of those is to start this farm school. This is a real surprise to me, but over the last apparently 10 or 15 years, there's a lot of young people, educated, who get their diploma, walk out onto the street and say, I don't want to go there. I got a degree in this or that, but I don't want to sit in front of a computer screen. Are there any opportunities in farming where I can be on the land? And we're starting a farm school so that those people can find a way to get educated, not only in how to grow carrots, but how to build a barn, fix a tractor. And it's the kind of hands-on education that the Virginia Tech School of Agriculture, the land-grant universities aren't teaching. And it also creates a supply side for us, which we really lack right now for our future agricultural. We're starting with the schools. Here's our Farm to School project. For the last 3 years, we've had the fourth graders come out, plant a crop of potatoes, harvest those potatoes, take them back to the schools, make mashed potatoes, and you have a local food day. We also wrote a grant, were awarded a grant to staff a childhood obesity specialist in the school system, and that grant has now been renewed, and it's making a big difference. Sustain Floyd also has had an educational film series and convened a number of community conversations about local issues, and we have kind of a think tank that we get together every couple months and think about issues, and we discuss controversial issues, and we break bread together, in this case pancakes, and we're also asking ourselves the question, what can a small community do in relation to energy independence? And we actually have This is 108 solar panels that we put on one of the buildings in town. And here's more. And we put a electric car charging station in Floyd just to have it there. And then here's the model with wind and solar. All of it together doesn't add up to long-term sustainability if it isn't going to create happiness. And so I leave you with these two metrics. The first one is a metric of the U.S. Department of Commerce, which has to do with the standard of living. You always hear about this everywhere. And the second metric, and both of these definitions come off Wikipedia, we're aiming at the second one. It's not simply about wealth and comfort. It's about a quality that transcends wealth and comfort. It's about the land. It's about your neighbor. It's about your community and what type of both emotional and intellectual environment do we live in, and are our kids happy, and are we looking after the land? And I close with this picture of the Watkins family who moved to Floyd 2 years ago from South Florida because they just wanted to have a place to raise their kids that they felt were going to be really beneficial for them. And I'm glad they chose Floyd, and I want them, I think that there small communities all over Appalachia can offer something to young families and young people and young professionals that's not simply about wealth and comfort. And I just leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, what Woody has talked about in Floyd is really quite amazing, and it really shows what committed leaders that have vision can do as long as there's support from that local community. And it's really a testament to the vision and the community leadership that folks have been able to bring around Floyd. A friend of mine grew up not far from Floyd in the big city of Hillsville, big town of, I'm sorry, Farmville, excuse me. And right nearby, and he went away to college in Boston. He works in Washington, D.C. He's been all over the world, and he goes back to his daddy's farm, and he goes, what happened in Floyd? Floyd used to be the place that no one wanted to go to. So it really is a remarkable transition that Woody has described. And although it is one of the best examples that we know of, is also replicated in other rural communities in Appalachia and could be in communities like other parts of Tennessee. So I'd like to start with, very briefly again, for each one of these, just the Greater Allegheny Passage. The Greater Allegheny Passage is part of the C&O Canal that runs from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. And right in the center of that is Cumberland, Maryland, which used to be an old kind of rundown mountain town and is now a vibrant arts community because of the vision and community support that has been provided there. And adjacent to Cumberland and throughout this Greater Allegheny Passage, communities have worked together to do a whole range of things to create access through trailheads to this C&O Canal Trail, to create platforms to transport bikes and hikers, kiosks that print out instructions of where to go visit in the local towns, bike lanes in local towns so that visitors can come through. And in fact, National Geographic just this year labeled it one of the best fall trips for 2012. And so this is up in the Appalachian Hills and mountains, and it's required four different heritage sites to work together to support these types of programs. And just want to provide a little quote here from one of the local visitors organizations. They say that trail statistics support the fact that bike trails are great for businesses in our cities and towns, and that they've seen the number of vehicles up, they've seen the number of visitors up in these small rural towns that come in and go to galleries and go to restaurants and buy local products. So that's just one example I'd like to provide to you. Another is the Pennsylvania Wilds Tourism Initiative. That's in north central Pennsylvania, and beautiful hiking trails there, a lot of hunting as well. And so it was originally initiated with that kind of focus. And more recently, they started Pennsylvania Wilds Artisans Project, where they've developed regional artisan trails that feature local galleries, shops, and production studios from local artists. They bring tourists through with a type of trail approach. They're developing a web retail portal for local artisans to sell their products that have that type of capability to sell products on a retail basis. And very importantly, they've also are developing and offering a series of training programs for artists, not on how to produce their art, but on how to run their business. So it's kind of reinforcing what Woody said. The entrepreneurial component, the entrepreneurial aspect of this is so important. How do I market my products? How do I price my products? How do I sell them through different distribution channels are also important for these artists to be successful and for them to sustain themselves. In addition, this program, Pennsylvania Wilds Artisan Trail, is also developing trade displays that can be provided at events throughout the state to bring additional people through. And also, I'm going to talk briefly about a program in Graham County, North Carolina, the Stocoa Valley Cultural Arts Center. And this facility is an old stone school built during the WPA 1930s era, and the local nonprofit has a 100-year lease on this school. And what they've done there is they've created a community-based program that not only teaches local crafts and music and things like furniture making and other types of traditions, but they also have a value-added food component to it as well. And during the high summer tourism season in western North Carolina in the mountains, they host Appalachian dinners, which are family-style dinners in this old school. And they also feature the music and the crafts. The training programs also focus, as Woody mentioned, on junior Appalachian musicians to continue that tradition. And it's just been a wonderful program for this mountain town that, again, helps pull folks in that otherwise might have bypassed this community. I think to kind of move in a slightly different direction, when we talk about assets and building on assets, part of the culture and fabric of our communities really are the food traditions as well. So when we talk about arts, culinary arts are so important. And so there are many strategies that help employ that as well. And they really tie effectively to more traditional arts, because when people come into a community to see visual arts, performing arts, they often want to eat the local food as well and those local traditions. And so there are a number of approaches there that have proven quite effective. In West Virginia, the Collaborative for the 21st Century Appalachia brings together farmers and chefs, home cooks, community members, and they have produced marketing material, booklets, 101 unique places to dine in West Virginia. And if you didn't think there were 101 unique places to dine in West Virginia, now you know that there are. They sponsor cook-offs on an annual basis, and they really add this strategy to a tourism's office, a local tourism's office toolkit. In North Georgia, the Saving Appalachian Gardens and Stories project works with the local university, State University in Dahlonega, and what they do is they demonstrate heirloom seeds and collect oral stories from oral histories from farmers there about the traditions and the foods that they have. In Ohio, the Appalachian Sustainable Food Cooperative focuses on the type of field-to-table activities that Woody described a bit there. In Floyd, not only how to grow products locally, how to process them locally, how to distribute them locally. They work closely with a local kitchen incubator there, actually one of the first in the nation, a group called AceNet there around Athens, Ohio, where they have dozens of local food entrepreneurs who make their products on they rent these commercial kitchens on an hourly basis and receive substantial marketing help in selling their products not only to local markets but throughout the United States as well. And not too far from here, in Mississippi, the Southern Foodways Alliance. Has anyone heard of the Southern Foodways Alliance? Wonderful. All right. Does some wonderful work helping promote and preserve traditions. I think one of their more recent publications, Cornbread Nation, number 3, focuses on foods of the Mountain South. And it's a great program to look into as an example. And lastly, I'm just going to mention the Edible Finger Lakes program up in New York State. And they work with vineyards, culinary artists, chefs, home cooks, country inns and restaurants and cafes. They sponsor harvest dinners. They give awards to local individuals to honor them for their work in this field, in the value-added foods sector. Raise funds, and I like one of the quotes one of the representatives has said here. They said that all these events are a winning recipe, a gorgeous location, amazing chefs, exquisite local food, and tables filled with people who grow the food and love the region. And that really helps promote the type of economic development that they've seen in Floyd, and really builds on the vibrancy that the arts community can provide and generate in these local rural areas. So that's just all I think I wanted to do, is provide examples that there are many other rural places that are using these strategies. And I think, hearkening back to our friend from Americans for the Arts, her original comment was, some of the key success factors in making these things happen are local champions that have a vision and the buy-in of local communities. And we see that when a group like ARC can support projects that have those two factors, the chances of success are much higher. So Woody, it's been great to learn more about what you're doing there.
Well, with that, anybody have any questions? I mean, you've got two experts here. And I did, when I went to visit Floyd, and I was there, and I called up my parents and said, well, I think I'm going to have to move to Floyd. And my mother was like, where's Floyd? It's actually fairly near where Kingsport, where I grew up. And so it's someplace that you have to visit. There's no place like it. But then there is, it's what sort of, we grew up the small towns, and it's got such an active, vibrant, creative feel to it. Does anybody have any questions? Sean?
First, I'd like to ask Woody how he has time to work. You own your own business, right?
I'm good at delegating.
Okay. I was just listening to you and thinking about the incredible scope of things that you've become involved in, and it sounds like you moved from a local initiative in Floyd, but clearly that has branched out in a lot of directions for you. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about the process of going from just concentrating on the local initiative and getting where you are now with this expansive sort of view of the region. Could you talk a little bit about how you made that personal transition?
Well, I sort of followed my interests, and I run a craft business, and have always been interested in the handmade product. And when I first moved to Floyd back in the 80s, my idea was to grow a little organic vegetable garden and kind of become invisible in the landscape. But as I'm very fond of saying, all that would have been fine if it weren't for those darn customers. And my lighting business became successful. And we realized, my wife and I, who were very close partners in all of this, that probably the best thing that we could do for our community was to create meaningful work for people. And so we grew the business around that. And then these initiatives came along. I got interested in them. I was asked to participate in them. I was asked to join a committee with Handmade in America, and then that led to me getting on the radar screen of some of the Virginia state agencies, and they asked me to do things. So it's really just following my own instincts about what I thought was important. You realize that not everything you think is important, but some of the things you think are important, and you just put your energy behind the things that you think will have legs in the future. And I'm just piggybacking on the work of very dedicated and creative people in the state and from Tennessee. Joe Wilson, who was the sort of the brainchild behind the Crooked Road, is from Mountain City, Tennessee. It's a regional collaborative endeavor, and I like I like the collaborative effort, and whenever we run into a roadblock, I kind of say, okay, now let's see, how do we get over this? And I enjoy that kind of work. So that's led me to places where I had never expected to go. And as this big regional initiative, which now includes Heartwood, it includes a big outdoor recreation piece called Appalachian Spring. I didn't give it that name, by the way. I'm always teasing about trying to recreate Aaron Copland here, but it's you know, it's sort of blossoming, and you see. But to me, all of it is a community development project. It's all about allowing small communities to find their identity, to find their authenticity through the arts and through culture. Because we've so many communities have lost. They don't know who they are. They've lost their sense of direction and place, and it's all there. It just has to be. It has to be objectified. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but okay, good.
One of the things that I have a question, and I don't know if there's one answer. You know, I've had the benefit of spending time with Becky Anderson over the years, and you know, here's an example. I'm with her one day, and she's talking. I think it's at an ARC meeting, and she's talking about capping methane gas off of a garbage dump and connecting potters to be able to use it, and all this stuff spinning around. And I walk away from that and I think, oh my goodness. And I sit here and I watch this, and I see Floyd, and I see other examples. And you know, I have a passion for some of this, but it's sort of like, oh my goodness, they could do that. That's me sitting over here. I'm in an interesting position because I not only represent the arts at a legislative level, I lobby for local county governments. I mean, I sit in rooms with county officials and listen to them struggle over a diminishing tax base, unfunded mandates coming down, and I don't know where the other 40% are, but most of the county mayors that I've met are some of those people east of the Mississippi that have one of those buildings, and they're all looking for the silver bullet, the manufacturing, smokestacks, the business park. I won't even talk about what they want the money to use for water and sewer, because some of you will know what I'm talking about. It's like they just go, and so you sit here and you think, okay, here are a group of very creative people. Here are wonderful ideas. Here's a state-convened group by the Arts Commission. Here's economic development. Here is a state that has land-grant college and a strong university and a strong farm bureau and all these different pieces. But what I heard repeatedly was that the spark and the kernel came from the people in that community. And you have rural counties all over Tennessee. You have people that can help deliver this idea and this message and this encouragement. Where do you start to change the culture? I mean, we have a 3-star program in ECD, and that got pushed to people and encouraged people to do this, and it's a checklist. And then you get a seal of approval, and it was the let's all do this. And it's a nice thing. You get extra points maybe if you get a grant for something, but where do real people, enthusiastic, but I'm going to get in my car and go home and live, I live in an urban area, and they're just, you know, I can pass it along and talk about it, and maybe it'll be interesting fodder at a dinner party, but where do all these pieces align to create the perfect storm, and what are individuals' roles and potential responsibilities in that dialogue? And then where are arts commissions and other partners in state government where there is a sphere of influence? Where are these other entrepreneurial types, the crafts people, everything? This is great. Where's the perfect storm? How does one person or groups of people begin to see the shift and make the change?
Hey, Woody, I want to interject one thing. And this is, Ray, I don't know what your feeling was. You know, we were on the other, when I was at ARC when a lot of this happened, and we were kind of on the other side of this. And we saw some of these things happening. And what ARC does is we, much of our money, their money, when I was there, flows to the states to make investments that they want to make, kind of following the buckets that we set out in our strategy. They have to fit in one of those buckets, but they're very broad buckets. But what, from my standpoint, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Ray, was Virginia set out a leadership model, and Governor Warner, who was the governor there, made as a strategy for Southwest Virginia. Arts and culture was really at the forefront of that. You know, I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he said, I understand that, you know, how remote and isolated these areas. They're not going to get a Nissan plant there. But, you know, he made his fortune in technology. So he said, you don't need 4-lane highways for technology. And he was very interested in how to level the playing field. He used to talk about that all the time for these rural communities in very isolated mountainous areas. I'm going on and on about this, I know, but it was interesting to me. He sort of put sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval to make some of these investments, and some investments that might be kind of wacky. And because, you know, from a funding standpoint, when you're sitting there and you're like, these are kind of wacky, and how am I going to justify this, and that sort of thing. But once sort of, you know, the state and federal kind of came together, and we laid a groundwork that together sort of that this was a strategy that was worth trying. But you had to, from our standpoint, okay, they're wacky. We don't care if they're wacky. If you have the information and the sort of return on investment that we can justify it. And so then we, you know, kind of looked for the Floyds and the leaders in the communities that were driving some of this. We looked for those. And then they, you know, the Floyds bubbled up, and really all that really was starting locally. We kind of developed, I think, a cover your rear in some ways philosophy with return on investment numbers that we could fund it. And then we spent a lot of time justifying it and worrying about how we were going to, because I think When I was at ARC, we were the first $1 million right away. And we don't do those types of investment when I was there. It was a very risky thing in some ways, but then it wasn't, because it was happening and it was going to happen anyway. And we felt like it was a really good source of economic development for them. And so it's so interesting to hear it from your side, and then from our side. I mean, I think good ideas, you feel everybody takes credit. And I'm not up here, for ARC taking credit, but we do feel a part of it. We did. Because we felt there was a risk worth taking. And because of, it wasn't risky at all. You can see that there's a real revenue and a real economy that's being created in Southwest Virginia with the assets they had because of people like Woody. Do you want to add to that?
Sure. And that's right on the button. And I guess I maybe want to add two things. One on the political side, policy side, and the other on how you get those things to bubble up in local communities. On the political side, that kind of emphasis that Ann mentioned that the governor had in Southwest Virginia, you see that in different states for different geographies. So, for example, in Ohio, Southern Ohio, Appalachian Ohio, happens to be very politically important for that state, for gubernatorial and U.S. Senate purposes. And governor after governor, whether they are R or D, are very interested in investing in Southern Ohio. So we see that kind of consistent focus at a policy level. In North Carolina, you see other parts of the geography of that state. My impression is Eastern North Carolina gets a good bit of focus for a whole variety of reasons in that state. And there are probably parts of Tennessee that have that kind of priority focus too. And so those might be parts you might want to think about starting something off in, that where folks really want to make some things happen. Secondly, Ann talked about how things bubbled up in local communities, and I think one of the things that you do is you bring best practice from other places into these regions. So Woody talked about Handmade in America and Becky Anderson. Well, that was one of the catalysts for this. Asheville does a tremendous job. Everyone knows what happens there. Becky has a wonderful vision, and she shared that vision and got people excited. And in some communities, not all, in a handful of communities, local folks had the vision to seize on that and to build local support. So what you do is you go with where your champions are. But you can do that by bringing in experts, by showing them what's worked elsewhere. You can do that through publications. You can do that through local conferences. You can do that through targeted workshops and trainings. There are a whole variety of strategies you can do. And then those seeds, a few of them will sprout, and then you got to keep watering those.
Woody, did you want to?
Well, I think you're asking the right question. How do you inspire someone, and how do you support that inspiration? When you were talking, I had this quote going through my mind. It comes from a poet that I really like. He's dead now. His name William Stafford, and one of his students says, I can't. You're saying we should write a poem every day, and I can't do it. And he said, well, lower your standards. And it's a little bit like that. We let our idealism get in the way of doing things. We don't see the beauty around us. We're too familiar with our own landscape. We don't know what's there. So when we start thinking about doing an asset inventory, we don't think that these things have any value. And we can't piece together a strategy based on it. And so I think it's risk-taking. You got to not be afraid to fail. You got to not be afraid to look silly in front of your neighbors. You just... I think it boils down to really participating in the culture that we happen to be in. And in every community, I got to believe, I mean, this may not be exactly true, but I think in many communities there's a champion, a spark plug, an interested person that just needs to be tapped on the shoulder and empowered and encouraged. And you know, I'm a private sector guy. I kind of go and do my own thing. A lot of times I'm the only guy at the table that isn't being paid. That gives me a lot of freedom. But I realize too that you might say the bureaucracy and just this organic turmoil of ideas and initiatives and actions and getting things going and gathering your neighborhood together, and those two things have to find a way to work together. And I think that I think many people are afraid of government. I think we need to get over that. Government wants to work with us. It wants to find partners, and so we have to find a way to cement those partnerships together. So that's what I got. It's something in there. Yeah.
In keeping with what you're saying and the issues that Molly raised, I have the 3-Star program. One of their components that they encouraged was local leadership development. And in a kind of a sad demonstration, I found myself being invited as the state folklorist from a desk in Nashville to come to many counties during their leadership development and tell them about their own heritage. You know, it's just like, well, okay, I know some stuff, but I don't live here every day. You guys ought to know, you know. But I saw into that systemic kind of process, and the astonishing thing that's lacking is even consciousness of nonprofit infrastructure in so many rural counties. To see all these assets and all the stuff, I could take you across Tennessee and show seeds of these kinds of things, interest, success, momentum in some places. But the staggering lack of an alternative to elected government as a power player of any sort in the county. And you know, I've thought a lot about this, and it's not the role of a government service agency to go out and help people start nonprofits. But you know, this, and maybe there is something in the water in Floyd County. The whole thing about deciding to lay infrastructure to their own utility company and so forth. Maybe there's a little precedent that contributed to momentum over the long haul. But that is astoundingly lacking in Tennessee. The notion of nonprofits is pretty much limited, especially in the art circles, to conventional, you know, old, as old definition, arts presenter groups or institutions. This thing of an instrumentality that would cultivate local leadership into coalitions and so forth. So I guess to cut to the chase, my questions are, has there been any systemic work in helping people develop nonprofits, in developing a mindset about what it is to be a board member? I think Linda Caldwell did a great thing in turning things topsy-turvy in the Tennessee overview. She says, you want to be on our board? You know what it takes? Come to the meetings. You don't come to the meetings, you can't stay on the board. And she has smoked out some incredible people in their county who were never assertive, never engaged, and it's been a very unconventional leadership development strategy, but it has gotten them in a really interesting place. But that question of how do we implant this, it's okay to do this, because along with the entrenchment and resentment of government, and maybe this is part of our culture. This may be really, really strong foothold stuff in Tennessee. There's a kind of a suspicion about, well, we don't want to get grant, you know. And all these things about, there are good parts of entrepreneurialism, there are good parts of government stuff, but it's a very propagandistic arena, and it's easily pigeonholed one way or the other. But the other thing is, what I witnessed in many of these counties is, it was very clear to me that the elected officials didn't really want real leadership anymore. And in your experiences in Virginia and wider in Appalachian Regional Commission, have there been tug of wars or places where elected officials didn't resist but really came on board with maybe there is a good alternative to the industrial park? And frankly, for years, Heritage money in ECD in Tennessee went into industrial parks. We were just joking, maybe some of those empty parks now should be open for festival grounds because they've got the power infrastructure there, and the water and so forth. But that whole dynamic with elected officials is something that we've seen even in trying to expand the ABC program with the Tennessee Arts Commission funding. Something about there's nobody to catch the ball behind the home plate at 80-something of our counties. Any comments?
So you don't throw it to them?
Yeah.
Right. You throw them something they do want to catch. And I mean, I think, what you're saying is right on the money. And, Floyd County, I think in the last 100 years has never voted for a Democratic candidate statewide election. I mean, it's a very conservative community. And if we were going to move it forward, we had to find a way that local government was not able to say no. And we are now a partner with them because there's some barriers that's been broken down a little bit at a time. Most local governments are people that just don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to do something that really hurts their community. So they say no to a lot of things. What can they say? What can you offer them that they can say yes to? It's funny because we went to them and said, made a proposal to local government in Floyd that we wanted to do a county-wide energy asset and energy inventory. We wanted to know how much energy was being used in commuting, in heating the schools, everything, and that we were gonna engage the services of a professor at Virginia Tech to help us with it. It came down to a 3-2 vote. It wasn't going to cost them a dime, but it was a resistance to moving. But after that 3-2 vote, that was the first thing we proposed. Then things softened up and they loosened up, and all of a sudden we were getting 5-0 votes on things. And it's really important not to hold on to your opinions. So you try something, it doesn't work. Okay, I'm letting go of that. Let's try something else over here until you find something that works. Because if it's not coming out of the community, it's not coming out of the grassroots, it can't be just overlaid. That just is impossible. Yeah. So something like that. I don't know if you guys
continue the analogy of you're throwing the ball and there's not someone there to catch, and throw them something they can catch. Build a farm team too. So how do you do that? And different states that we work in have different kinds of strategies. There are some that have a university-based institute of local government that does a good bit of leadership training for local government. I don't know if UT does that at all here, but they do. So that's
cities and
okay. So that's
municipalities
Yeah, okay, yeah, so that's kind of one strategy. In other states, not in our geography, but in other states in the U.S., rural communities feel in that state that they have less of a voice in state government. So they have created rural development organizations, rural development nonprofits. There's actually one in North Carolina, which is well constituted by rural leaders. There's one in Oregon that I'm well aware of too. And so they advocate for rural priorities, and so you get a lot of leadership building for that with local elected officials. So that's just another thought too, is how to build that next team that can come up and catch what you want to throw to them.
Specifically,
I think,
nonprofit development.
Roby, maybe you can come up and do it after. We've run out of time, and I know everybody very much needs a break before our last session, which is the advocacy session. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate you coming to this session. Thank you.